it's Lisa Rubel, and I'm here with the very last block of the Rainbow Kaleidoscope BOM. Here's what the quilt that we're making looks like. Each month uses black, white, and a different color for a full rainbow of 12 different blocks. Now this quilt is based on our yellow and gray sampler from last year, but this year we're remaking it in bright colors instead. So for our last block, we picked a great one. This is what it looks like. It has several different quilting techniques in it and that bright red tonal print that goes along with the black and white. By purchasing the kit, you'll receive links to PDF patterns for each of the blocks, as well as a video tutorial that tells you how to put together each of the blocks made in this quilt. And in the video tutorial for block 12, you'll see we'll be making this block right up here, which is the same as our block here, just in a slightly different color scheme, so you can follow along with those instructions. So get your 12th block made, and next month we'll be back with assembly directions about how to put together the whole quilt with sashing strips, sashing squares, and border. I can't wait to see it finished. And if you have made any of these blocks and are sewing along with us, we hope you'll share on social media. You can share on Facebook or on Instagram and use the hashtag Rainbow Kaleidoscope BOM. Hi, I'm Lisa Rubel from Love to Color My World, and today I'm going to walk you through the very last block in our Sunshine and Shadows Block of the Month quilt. You can see it behind me here. We've got 12 different blocks, and today we'll be working on number 12, which is right down here. It's a block with a lot of little pieces, so we're ending with a bang. So for this block, we've got our gray center square. We've got some larger yellow squares that we'll be using small white squares to put little quick corners on, and then some gray small squares and white rectangles to make those outer corner units. So let's get started. So the first section we're going to assemble is the center section right here. So we're going to start out with our gray square in the middle and then build a frame around it. My fabrics are a white on white, so I'm going to just make extra sure that I have them right side up, because sometimes that can be a little tricky. And then we will put small gray squares in the corner. Oh, there we go. So what we're going to do is to sew these two white rectangles to our center square, and then sew the gray squares to the rectangle for both the top and the bottom. So I've got my section stitched, and now it's time to press. There are pressing arrows on the pattern, but the key is to press the seam allowances in the opposite direction for the top and bottom units as for the center. And that will allow our seams to nest when we assemble. So I'm going to press towards my darker fabric. So for the center unit, it means pressing toward the middle, and then for these top and bottom units, I'm going to press toward the corners. So to assemble these, we're going to flip that top one over, and you can see my top seam goes to the right, and then the center seam goes to the left, so those will nest nicely. I'm going to get those lined up and put a pin in. I like to put a pin right after the seam I'm trying to match, because then I can leave the pin in place as long as possible to get a better join. I've got that one pinned. I'm going to go ahead and get this bottom one set up as well. So here's my center unit, little 9 patch. And for these, I'm going to press toward my center unit as well. The next section that we're going to be assembling are these corner units right up here. And for those, we're going to use one gray square, one white square, and one white rectangle. So I'm going to sew these two squares together and then add the rectangle onto the side. So here's my corner unit. We're going to use 4 of these, one for each of the 4 corners. And you can make all of them exactly the same, because whether you have it turned this way, this way or this way, you'll always have that gray square towards the inner corner and the white on the other 3 sides. It doesn't matter where exactly this white seam is, as long as you have that look. So our last units to assemble for this block are the yellow and white quick corners, and we have 8 of those to make. So we're going to start out with a yellow square and 2 white squares. I'm going to turn them right side down and use a fabric marking pen to draw a diagonal line from one corner to the opposite corner. Then what I'm going to do is position the first one there. We're going to stitch on that drawn line, and then position the second one in the opposite corner with the lines running parallel to each other and stitch on that line as well. So here is my first stitched unit, and I'm going to trim off the triangles. I'm going to put my 1/4 inch line on that drawn and stitched line and trim off the corner triangles beyond that on both sides. And then it's time to press. Now I've got a pressing trick for you here. In order to help assemble our block more easily, we're going to press 4 of these yellow and white units with the seam allowances going towards the corners, so pressing towards the white fabric. And then we're going to press 4 with the seam allowances heading towards the yellow, and that will allow our seams to nest when we assemble our block. So we're going to make 8 of these, 4 that have the seam allowances pressed towards our outer corners, the white corners, and 4 with the seam allowances pressed towards the yellow center, and then we'll assemble our block. So once you have your yellow and white units created, it's time to start assembling. Now I've got mine sorted into 2 piles, one where the seams are pressed toward the yellow center, and one where they're pressed out towards the white corners. And that will help you right here. So what I'm going to do is put my first 2 out, and I'm going to put one on top each other and nest those seams, which will allow it to go together more easily and also make sure we have a nice join where those seams hit each other. I'm going to put a pin in there, and then one up here at the top as well. And then I'm going to stitch down that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So there we go. I've got a nice join right here. I'm going to press this unit, and you can press it in either direction or even open if you prefer that. This won't be lined up with any other seams, so we don't have to be concerned about nesting. I'm going to set that one aside, and I'm going to do the same thing with the other 3 yellow and white pairs and sew them together so I have 4 units that look like that. And now it's time to put our block together. So we're going to start out with our center square and then place a yellow unit above, below, and on each side. And then the corner units. You just want to make sure that your corner unit is set up so that the gray square is towards the center and touching that center unit, because that's what gives us that X look right here. Looks good? Okay, so what we're going to do is start out by sewing these 2 units to our center unit, and then at the same time sew corner units to our yellow units for both the top and the bottom, and then we'll have 3 rows that will join together. All right, we're almost done with our last block. Here is my center row unit, and then the top and bottom row units that look like this. Now before you go and assemble your rows, just take a quick look back at your pattern and make sure that everything is pointing in the right direction, because it's a lot easier to fix a mistake now than once it's all together. Mine looks good, so I'm going to assemble my rows. So for the seams here, just like on the pattern shows, I pressed the center seams toward the center block and then the top and bottom towards the corner blocks. So when I go to pin these, my seams in those spots will nest. I'm going to put a couple pins in here. And over here as well. Get those seams aligned. And then put one in the center as well, just to hold things together. So I'm going to do the same down on this end, and then I will sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance down both of those lines to finish the block. And here's the finished block. Let's take a look. We've got our gray and white 9 patch in the center and the yellow frame around it, and then our X going through. Looks pretty great. So we've finished all 12 blocks in the Sunshine and Shadows Block of the Month quilt. That means that next month we'll be putting the whole quilt together. So make sure you have all your blocks finished. Grab your sashing fabric, your leftover yellows, because we'll be using those for sashing squares, and your border fabric, and we'll be putting this quilt together. It'll be so fun to see how it turns out. So I hope you'll join me next month to assemble our quilt, and in the meantime, visit sitandsewfabrics.com to see the variety of pre-cut and traditional yardage quilt kits that they carry. See you next month.